Hello Crafty Friends, this is Jen and thank you for joining me today. Today I have another how-to video for you. We're going to make a jar out of a topper tag, and these are the Burniston topper tags. These are a great set with different size tags that you can use for gifts or for the front of a card, anything you'd like to use them for. But today we're going to turn them into a jar and we're going to add some fireflies to it. So the first step is I'm just going to measure out where I'm taking off the top of the tag because we don't need that part. And I drew out one side of the jar and I'm just taking that little extra piece, placing it on the other half, and then sketching that out so that both sides are equal. And then I'm just going to trim that other half out. Because if you're like me, I can draw one side, but I can't make the other side look exact. So this is a technique to use so that both sides pretty much look exact. And now we have the shape of our jar. So I also die cut a second topper tag, and I'm just going to trim off part of the tag top. We don't need the area that's rounded. We're using this to make the lid for the jar. And the opening that I have at the top of our bottle or our jar is about 2 inches. And so I'm going to make this just a little bigger than that. I'm just sketching out roughly the kind of bends in the lid, because the lids aren't straight up and down. They do have some ridges and different bumps. So I'm just measuring out and then making a little mark where I want the overhang. And I'm creating another line so that I can make the other side of the lid jar the same as, so that both sides are equal. And once I have that drawn out, then I'm going to trim that out with my scissors. Once I'm done this, we're going to then erase our lines because we don't want them showing. And we also want to round off the edges, which is what I'm doing here with my scissors. And you just want to take a little trim. It doesn't have to be anything big, but you just want to round those edges off. So I'm just erasing my pencil lines. And now you can see we've made a lid for our jar. So now I'm going to add some color to my jar, and I'm using Distress Oxide ink in Speckled Egg. And I have this is a new Distress ink that I recently purchased. So I have a new foam brush for it. And I'm just lightly going over around the bottle. But I realized that I didn't want my fingerprints on it, so I'm just going to hold it down with my rag that I have just set aside for cleaning up purposes. And I'm starting off lightly, and then I'm going to go over it a few times just so that it gets thoroughly coated. You don't want it to be overpowering because really the little fireflies in the jar are going to be what people really want to see. So I just lightly went over the edges of the jar with our Speckled Egg Distress ink. And now we're going to color in the lid using Copic markers. there we have our lid done. So I'm just going to add a little more detail to the lid, darken it up, go over it again with the different Copic markers in the N series. And I think that looks pretty good. So as you can see, there's our lid for our jar. And now we're going to start on the fireflies. This is from Karen Burniston's Flutter Charms, and this is actually the bumblebee. But I thought we could make this work to make a firefly. So I'm just showing you how the pieces are going together. That oval piece goes into the back. And we're going to have to do some trimming. But let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim off the charm holder at the top of the bee die. And if you look up what a firefly looks like, it has a orange head and it's kind of like a blacky brown body. And so I just went in with a black for the antennae and for the body. And then I'm going in with N6 for the rest of the body. Now for the inner part, I went with two different colors. So I went with the warm grays for the first two stripes, but we want the bottom part to be yellow because that's where the part of the bug lights up. So we're going to go in with Y17 and Y13 to create the bottom of the firefly. I'm going to glue this on with my Lineco neutral pH adhesive and my fine tip bottle, both which you can get from KarenBurniston.com. And there you have your little firefly. So I'm going to punch a little hole in the bottom because this is going to be a light up card. And we want the light to come out where the lightning bug actually lights up. And I'm just adding the wings. So we're going with B05 and B00. And then we're going to add these onto the back. The firefly, their wings are on their back, not so much like to the side. So I'm just adding a little dab of glue and I'm just placing them on the back of the what's supposed to be a bee. So let that glue set. And there we have a firefly. So now I have all three fireflies ready. And I'm just going to glue the lid on for my bottle or my jar. And now we need to place the fireflies where we want them and then mark out on the jar where we have to punch a hole so that the light can come through. So now I'm just kind of deciding where do I want the fireflies, and you could put them anywhere you want. But once I get them set, I'm going to mark them with a pencil in the little punched hole that I made in the bottom. And then I know that that's where I have to punch a hole as well. And this is just, I believe, a 1/8 punch. It's just a very tiny hole punch. I think I got it from Michael's. And now I'm going to line up the holes and then place my fireflies onto my bottle. And then once we have those in place, we'll just set that aside because now we're going to work on the background of the card. For the background of the card, I used Karen Burniston's rectangles and labels, and it's a rectangle and label die set that can fit a 5x7 card, which is amazing. So what I want to do here is I really love that scalloped or that cross-hatched edge. And so eventually what I'm going to do is tape off that edge. But first we need to punch the holes into the background. And I realized that my hole punch wasn't long enough to fit in to punch the holes out properly. So I'm just going in with my flower puncher and making the holes into the back. I've had to trim them and I had to make them a little bigger than I initially thought I'd have to. And you have to be careful when you do it this way because it the paper bunches up at the back and then it could seal over the hole. So I'm just trimming that away from the back of the hole so that when I do push it down, it doesn't cover up where the light's supposed to come through. So now that that's done, we are going to start with our background. So for the background, I'm using Distress Oxide ink in Tumbled Glass, Broken China, Chipped Sapphire, and Black Soot. And like I said, I'm going to tape off the edges on this rectangle because I want that crosshatch border to go around the background. This is just a repositionable pink pixie tape. I find that when you use it the first time, sometimes it's best to kind of stick it on your pants, pull it off, and then it won't wreck your work. But this was just the edge, so I wasn't too worried about it. So let's get started on the background. And there our background is done. I've let it sit aside and dry for about an hour just to make sure that the Distress ink was good and dry. Now I'm adding Copic Opaque white paint mixed with a little water to add a starry background. And I'm just splattering this with a dry paintbrush. And then I'm going to set that aside to dry. And it doesn't take long. It only takes maybe 30 seconds to dry. So now I'm going to create the grass that I want to go around the bottom of my jar. In order to do this, I die cut another rectangle using the 5x7 crosshatch rectangles in the set that I spoke of earlier. And I used Burniston's Nature Edges die set. This is a really excellent die set. It has a die for grass, it has a die for what could be snow hills or sand hills, and it has a cloud die as well. So I die cut it from using that die set, and then I decided that I didn't want the edges of the crosshatch on the grass. I wanted it to stay white border all the way around. So I just took my ruler and drew out the lines, and then I trimmed the crosshatch part off. So now I'm going to color in my grass. For that, I'm using Distress Oxide ink in Mowed Lawn and Rustic Wilderness. I'm just going in with the Mowed Lawn first, and you want to just be careful when adding this to the grass blades. They can bend a little bit. That's why I like to use a heavyweight cardstock. Then it doesn't bend as much. So, and then I'm going into the base with the darker green and then just blending the two together. So now we have our grass done. For the card base, I went with a 5x7 card. So 10 inches by 7 inches, scored in the middle at 5. And I'm just using my bone folder to make sure that I get a good crisp fold on that. And there's our card base ready to go. And I'm just lining up the background onto the card base and using a white jelly pen to mark where the lights are going to go, because now we're going to put our chibi lights on. And you could use a I believe it's Pear Blossom that has the lights, but you could use those if you wanted. They're a lot easier. But I didn't have any of those, so I just went with the Chibi lights. And one good thing about the Chibi lights is you can get them in different colors. So there's like reds and blues, purples, greens, orange, yellow, white. So I went with a yellow with yellow lights for this card. And I'm just making sure that I've put these on correctly. Everything's good and straight. And I'm just going to get out my set. So with this one, it comes, if you get the Chibi lights set, it comes with the copper, it's like a copper tape, and you also get a couple of batteries, and then you get some white lights. Now, in the past, I've bought different colored lights to make different kinds of cards. Right now, I'm just marking out where I want the battery to go, because that's where you're going to have to push down onto the battery to get the lights to work. I'm also marking out the positive and the negative lines because you have to have one positive and one negative. And you also have to make a little housing for your battery. This is one good thing with the Pear Blossom Easy Lights. It already has a battery housing. You just have to glue it down and then just put the lights wherever you want. So it definitely is less work. But with these, you do get different colors with the Chibi lights. And I just like to mark what is positive and what is negative so that I don't get them mixed up. Now I'm just adding my copper tape, making sure that I hit the areas close to the dot, but not over it. And then we're going to just run those lines for positive and negative. And I like to mark that out with pencil. I always find it helps. And then I like to go over it very carefully with my bone folder so that I get a good flat surface. And then that way you don't have to worry about, if there's a lump or it could peel up. That way it's good and secure on your card base. And now we have all our copper wire ready. I'm just getting rid of the extra backing paper. So we'll go over that again, making sure that that's good and pressed down. And now I have my lights out. So I'm just going to find the yellow ones and I'm going to add the lights, and the little lights will show you what side is positive and what side is negative. And then it just makes it easier for you to add them on. So I'm just adding those little yellow lights on. And now we'll give it a test. And they work. So now we want to add foam tape. You need to put foam tape onto the backing. And you want to make sure that you don't put foam tape onto the copper tape. So you want to put foam tape all the way around. And I also like to put foam tape around where the battery is. So I'm just adding little bits of foam tape here and there, and that will keep the battery secure in the little paper housing that you've made. And then this just ensures that, everything is good and secure. But I realized that I needed to add another layer of foam tape. And I realized this after I put the background on, and then realized that the lights wouldn't turn off because there was so much pressure on it. If I did this again, I wouldn't use the same size foam tape. I would use a thinner foam tape on top of this foam tape. This foam tape is probably about 1/8 of an inch thick. And I would go with the 1/8 and the like a 1/16 of an inch foam tape, or a thinner foam tape so that it wasn't so bulky. And I'm just adding 2 layers on now. As you can see, some of it stuck to the back with the black paper. but it was easy to remove. And now I'm just carefully measuring out where my background should go, making sure that it's lined up properly. And this part is a little finicky only because I do have all that foam tape on the background, but I have that on and the light works great. So now we can add the jar onto the background. And I'm just going to turn the light on and then see where to put the jar. I'm just going to glue that down with my Lineco neutral pH adhesive. And then I'm going to add my grass. And I just like to make sure that I get glue on the tips of the blades just so that it stays secure. In case you know it's in the envelope when you send it, you don't want it to come up. So last but not least, all we have left to do is work on our sentiment. So I wanted to make it something funny, so I went with bugs and kisses. So I used the mini alphabet and numbers from Burniston to die cut out the word bugs. And I used word set 9, love, from Burniston to die cut the hugs and kisses. But I got rid of the word hugs, and then I took the and the kisses and separated them because I want to put them in different areas on the card. So I'm starting with the S and working backwards so that I have good placement as to where I want the word bugs. And for this I used a glossy black cardstock that I got from Michael's. I like this because it's shiny. It's also very thick, which is nice. So you can double it up if you wanted, but it's not overly necessary on a card like this. And we're just going to add the rest of the sentiment. And I just want to lightly press that down. It doesn't take very long for the glue to set, but it does give you enough time that if you need to reposition your words, you can, which is great. And there we are. We have our sentiment on. And last but not least, we need to add a little spot to show people where to press to make the card light up. So to do this, I decided to die cut a little red heart using Burniston's heart crosshatch, and it's the smallest heart, and I just wrote push with my white jelly pen. And I'm just going to glue that onto the spot where you would push down on the battery to get the lights to light up. And there we go. So we've added our buttons so that people know where to push to light the card up, and we're all done. And here's our finished card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.